Chapter 5. What are truckers like? When the evil overlord and I had some extra downtime while out on the road, we liked to take a taxi or bobtail, that's a truck without a trailer, to a normal restaurant that wasn't surrounded by big rigs. When the waiter or waitress found out that we were from out of town, they usually asked if we were having fun on vacation. When we told them we weren't on vacation and that we drove a truck for a living, the reaction was usually the same. A slight pause, as if caught off guard, and then a genuine look of disbelief. And then came the inevitable compliment of all compliments. "You don't look like truckers." In the words of the king, "Thank you. Thank you very much." We've gotten that reaction from nearly everyone we've ever told, and it always causes us to look at each other with crap-eating grins.
Isn't that an insult to truckers, saying that you're glad you don't look like truckers? Ain't y'all proud to be trucking folk?
Well, not really, considering the reputation truckers have as a whole. Reputation true or not. I hate to say it, but we all have a stereotypical trucker running around in our brains. A trucker hat, a flannel shirt, suspenders over a beer gut, cowboy boots, unshaven, a bad case of BO, bad breath, and a thick southern drawl sliding out past the cigarette and a few remaining yellow teeth. No wonder. That's the way we're portrayed in nearly every movie and TV show, except for BJ and the Bear, who was a real looker. BJ, I mean. I'm not into bestiality. Then again, I'm not into men either. I have to make a confession here. In my lifetime, I've been guilty of two of those stereotypical trucker traits. The suspenders hanging from my sides in the 80s, hey, I was styling, man. And the flannel shirt during the 90s grunge era. Alice in Chains rules. Well, I guess that pretty much dates me, huh? The evil overlord would also like you to know that she looked great in her mega-huge belts, miniskirts, and Madonna lace from her 80s wardrobe. Man, I hope I live to finish this book. She did look awesome in that getup, though. She even won the shortest skirt award in her senior yearbook. Those miniskirts. Now let me tell you. What? Where am I? Whew, is it hot in here? Ooh, Daddy needs a cold shower. Seriously, though, I've met plenty of those stereotypical truckers. I'm sure you've smelled them, too. I mean, seen them. But not all truckers look, sound, and smell like that. Many of the new breed of truckers look like your everyday Joe. If he didn't tell you drove a truck, you'd never know it. Just look at the evil overlord. She looks as much like a trucker as Steve Martin looks like a poor black child. If you're too young to get that joke, go rent the movie The Jerk. You won't regret it. And look at me. According to the evil overlord, in my early trucking years, I looked more like a gay yuppie than a truck driver, thanks mostly to my hairstyle at the time. Maybe there's something to that. After all, the entire 2 years we lived in Dallas, I was never hit on by one solitary female, but I was pursued by many a gay man. I had one follow me home from work one night and sit outside my apartment flashing his headlights at me. Another time I got an anonymous note on my motorcycle telling me in graphic detail what they'd like to do to me. Gag a maggot. I found out later it was a guy I knew. He said he was joking, but the evil overlord and I weren't so sure about that. The evil overlord thinks it's gut-wrenching hilarious that gay men pursue me. I, however, don't find it amusing at all, because in my mind, I have the sexual prowess of Bond, James Bond, not Liberace. For crying out loud, it's women that should be lusting after a mountain of masculinity like me, not gay men. Still, I'm debating if looking like a gay yuppie is a bad thing or not. After all, every gay yuppie I've ever seen is usually good looking and really buff, so maybe I should quit before this gets any weirder. Where was I? Oh yeah. My point is that you should try to banish that movie trucker from your mind and realize you don't have to own a rebel flag and a coon dog to become a truck driver. It's even okay if you brush your teeth. You can be perfectly average and still drive a truck.
But what if I ain't perfectly average?
Don't worry, size doesn't matter. At least that's what women say, the stinking liars. But in trucking, that is true. It doesn't matter if you're smaller than normal, larger than life, or just plain old average sized. This goes for both men and women. It needs to be noted that if you're a woman planning to go it alone, you especially need to understand that you don't have to be a big, burly tomboy of a girl to drive a truck all by yourself. My wife, despite her ominous nickname, is a girly girl through and through, except for that potty mouth, which has been known to make lumberjacks cry. God chose the variety pack when he created man. He also apparently has a great sense of humor. In the words of the 60s recording star, Roger Miller, "It takes all kinds to make a world whoop, 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 whoop." Yep, those are the real lyrics. That's so true in trucking. I've seen women the size of my mother-in-law step out of big rigs before, and she's only 3'2". That's an exaggeration. She's really 3'4". She's so short that she has to reach up just to tie her shoelaces. As a matter of fact, every time I get a chance, I ask my mother-in-law to grab something that we're both well aware is out of her reach. I just can't help myself. Of course, I've also seen the 6'1", 350-pound Amazon woman with big black hairs growing out of the wart on her chin. This is the kind of woman that could easily stomp my brains into the concrete while riding me like a horse and calling me sissy boy. Now there's a mental picture I could do without. Both extremes of women are perfectly comfortable hopping in the seat of a big rig, but the average woman driver is, well, average. The same goes for men. I've seen more morbidly obese men than I care to think about since I started trucking. Unfortunately, sitting in the driver's seat for hours on end and eating huge chicken fried steaks smothered in country gravy every other day sort of lends itself to packing on the pounds. I'm suddenly hungry. My point here is not to criticize. Heck, I can't help but feel for someone that big. It's painful watching some of these guys trying to get in or out of their truck. Just make sure you don't let your husky size keep you from driving a truck if that's what you want to do with your life. Just know that a life in trucking is not known for its healthy lifestyle, and unless you really watch it, your weight problem will likely get worse. At the other end of the spectrum, I've seen lots of guys who my mother-in-law could call shorty. You know the type, 5 foot tall, tipping the scales at a whopping 95 pounds and strutting along with each of their arms a foot away from their ribs, no doubt to make room for those massive biceps. Being excessively large or smaller than average shouldn't keep you from trucking, but you do need to take it into consideration. When you see a trucking company's advertisement, it will no doubt say something like 97% no-touch freight. The percentage will vary, but basically here's what this bit of trucker jargon means. No-touch freight means just that. You won't touch it. This particular company is saying that 97% of the load you haul will be loaded or unloaded by someone other than you. Bear with me here and you'll see there's a point. The loader or unloader will either be an employee who works for the shipper or receiver or someone called a lumper. A lumper is someone who gets paid to load or unload your trailer for you. Sometimes you have a choice to use their services. Other times you don't. Lumpers are just one of the many reasons I say you should probably go to work for a large carrier when you start your driving career. If you are forced to use a lumper, a large company will pay for it by what is, in essence, a company check. They might even have an account already set up with the lumper service. If you work for a small company, you may have to pay the lumper up front and hope to get reimbursed by your company later on. Even worse, if you own your own truck, that lumper pay is probably coming out of your own pocket. I've had lumper fees as low as $30 and as high as $275, none of which I've ever paid for. The reason I mention this is because very few companies advertise 100% no-touch freight. But even if a company says that you need to be able to load or unload an entire trailer if necessary, the fact is that very few large carriers will require you to unload trailers by hand on a regular basis. This is another reason I recommend driving for a large trucking company. Since 1997, I bet I've hand unloaded less than 5 trailers, so you can see that it's not a very common occurrence. Keep in mind that's hand unloaded. I've had to unload more trailers than that, but usually it's with the help of a pallet jack, so you don't have to handle 1,300 boxes. You just have to roll 24 pallets off your trailer and onto the dock. Granted, some of these pallets can be really heavy. Not too long ago, I had to roll 20 pallets of product to the back of a trailer. Most places have trailer-high docks for easy unloading, but this place didn't. The receiving guy lifted a manual pallet jack into my trailer with his forklift, and I went to work. I have to tell you, It was all I could do to finish the job. My thighs were burning by the end, and my legs felt like jelly. And for the record, these weren't pallets of styrofoam cups. Each pallet weighed 2,200 pounds. I asked the unloader if he'd ever had anyone who couldn't do the job. I mean, I'm not in great shape by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm a lot more fit than a lot of truckers, not to mention women. He said it had happened a few times. He said that some really fat truckers had managed it, but only with periodic breaks, and it had taken a long time to unload. He also said that he'd had both men and women drivers call a local temp agency and have them ship out a guy to help out. So you can see that you shouldn't let loading or unloading freak you out if you're a bit larger or smaller than you'd like to be. Granted, you might have to pay someone to bail you out every now and then, but hey, as I said, you have to remember that that is not the norm. Now, back to that point I promised. If you have a size issue when it comes time to pick a company to drive for, you need to make sure you choose a carrier with a high percentage of no-touch freight. These are the types of things that will be covered in my next book, How to Find a Great Truck Driving Job. Again, go to abouttruckdriving.com to find out more about that book. Nowadays, most carriers would rather keep you fresh for driving, because if you aren't driving, you aren't making them any money. Still, you might have to unload a trailer by hand every once in a blue moon. But even so, I've seen solo women drivers out on the road who I know couldn't unload an entire truck by themselves, yet they're driving a truck anyway. So whether you're Tiny Tim, Andre the Giant, a Bahama Mama, or one of the Little Women, don't let your size determine your decision. Tattoos, face and body piercing, and dudes with hippie hair. Earlier I mentioned that my hairstyle got me a lot of unwanted attention. This hairstyle was a remnant from my rock and roll days. It was over halfway down to my butt, all one length, and as straight as the person it sprouts from. The evil overlord's 6-year-old cousin referred to it as mommy hair. Gee, that's always good for your masculinity. Anyway, now it's short, really short. Did trucking make me cut it? Well, yes and no. Lots of trucking companies would have hired me with long hair, but the company we chose wanted me to cut it above the collar. Let me say right now that this is not at all common. Clean cut is not a term often associated with truckers. Take a trip to any local truck stop and look at all the truckers if you don't believe me. Still, for me, it was time for the hair to go. I was no longer a wannabe rock star, and the evil overlord convinced me it was time for a change. While it was really hard to cut my hair, it took 8 years to grow out. Life on the road was a lot easier without having to mess with it all the time. But if you've got mommy hair and want to keep it, by all means, do so. Just find a company that allows it. It won't be difficult. The same goes for tattoos and body piercings. Some companies won't like your body art. Some don't care. Some won't hire you with face tattoos or any jewelry above the collar. I should be clear that the jewelry thing is fine for women. Some will be all right with your tattoos as long as they're covered while you're working. Others don't even care if you got a face tattoo that makes you look like a walking jack-o'-lantern. Some may require you to remove your eyebrow staples and your tongue ring while you're working. Others don't care. There are a bunch of companies out there with different requirements. Find one that accepts your particular form of body art if you're not willing to or can't part with them. And get a tetanus shot while you're at it. That tongue spike looks like it's getting infected. Speaking of stuff I don't understand. Cross-dressers. Yes, I've actually seen a few of you out here. I remember walking into a shipper one day and looking up to see a woman driver dressed in a pink dress and heels. It reminded me of the type of thing that Dolores Umbridge would wear. That's a character from the Harry Potter books, if you're not aware of that. There's a link in the text. The closer I got, the more I knew something was off. Now I know we're supposed to be tolerant of other people's lifestyles, but being from a small town, I'm not used to being confronted with stuff like this. In retrospect, I think I did a pretty good job. I spoke and cut up with him, or her, as I would with any other driver. At least that's how it went in my mind. For all I know, I had a Chief Inspector Dreyfus-worthy eye twitch going on. And if you don't know who that is, you really need to expand your horizons. There's a link to a YouTube clip. I tell you this just so you'll know that when I say the trucking industry will take nearly anyone, I mean nearly anyone. As a matter of fact, the crossdresser may actually have a leg up on us drivers who have a more fixed wardrobe. I had one terminal manager tell me that dealing with crossdressers put him and everyone in his office in a heightened sense of awareness. They had to be extra careful to address him as her, for one thing. He said it also put him in a difficult position when it came to employment. He said he felt like he had to hire a crossdresser even if they didn't have a good work history. Furthermore, he also didn't feel like he could fire one if he needed to. He was always afraid they would claim they had been discriminated against. Now maybe this was all in his head, but I have a feeling I'd have felt the exact same way if put in his shoes. So anyway, at least you know if you're the kind of guy who likes to wear pearls, there's a place for you in trucking. Likewise, if you're a woman who wants to be called Dwayne, no one's going to keep you out of a trucking career either. Here's one last note for those of you with physical disabilities. Believe it or not, many truck stops have handicapped parking spaces for truckers. Of course, they won't do you much good if some physically fit jerk is parked there. Then again, you're probably already used to people illegally parking in your designated spaces, so it probably won't be a big change for you. Like every other public place, the majority of truck stops are prepared to serve people with disabilities. All the facilities that you may need are accessible, including at least one of the shower rooms. As far as the actual act of driving goes, if you have the loss of a limb, you may need to wade through some red tape in order to drive a truck. We'll be discussing more about disabilities in Chapter 15. And there'll be some links in the appendix of the written version of this that will help you determine whether you're qualified to be a truck driver. The bottom line is this: come big, come small, come one, come all. Eat your heart out, Dr. Seuss. This book is going to give you lots of factors that should help you decide if a truck driving job is right for you. Your physical size is just one of those factors, and as you've seen, size shouldn't keep you from driving a truck if that's what you want to do with your life. Many trucking companies will be clamoring for you, no matter how big or small you are.